Hello, everybody watching. Thank you for joining me for another mostly live LinkedIn interview series. And today is a live video. The last few weeks were recorded because I was hiking in the backcountry, and I'm back and I'm super excited to share our guest with you today. Our guest today that will be joining us is Fiona Wallace. And where did I lost my intro for Fiona. So Fiona and I met at when we worked together at Nestle Purina, and Fiona is the owner, or she started a company called NutritionOps with her nutrition experience. She has a PhD in nutrition as well as an MBA. And I'm super excited to introduce Fiona, who provides nutrition consulting services to leading organizations such as UNICEF, Helen Keller Organization, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. Like I said, she holds her PhD in Nutritional Science, and she worked for many years in major food manufacturers in various scientific and technical roles with the aim to make food products healthier for both humans and animals. She loves to be engaged in projects where she uses her creativity to find solutions to sticky problems, which is why she's a guest on our show today. She's based in Toronto, Canada, as the proud owner of 2 fairly well-behaved dogs. The other thing we're going to talk about today is Fiona's currently working on her first book, a novel about a dog walking detective. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Fiona Wallace today. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I've got your website up here for anybody who wants to check out your website. And I'd love to, maybe you can share a little bit about kind of how you became a nutrition scientist and your role, where the MBA fit in, and just kind of your professional career, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. So I've had a bit of a long and winding road to where I am now. Hasn't really been that direct. I did, in 1988, I went off to University of Toronto. After the first couple of years, you have to pick a major, and I'd always loved to cook, and I was doing life sciences, and nutrition was an option. So I chose nutrition just because it was a good fit, and I'm very glad that I did, because it's a very interdisciplinary science, and there's many different avenues you can go down with a nutrition degree. Obviously, you can do dietetics, or you can potentially, well, not at University of Toronto, but you can take it and do that, take further training, go on, or you can go on into research. And then there's many different avenues. You can do everything from basic science up to policy, up to, food science, and working in, for NGOs or for food companies. There's a lot you can do with that degree. But unfortunately, with only a BSc, there's very little you can do. So after I finished, I ended up going backpacking, and I basically didn't come home for 15 years. So I left Canada. I went backpacking around Europe. I had a British passport. I decided that, this was in the early 90s, and there was a terrible recession on. And I was like, all my friends had basically just come out of university and gotten temporary jobs. So then I basically decided, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to go do it in London, where it's more exciting than Toronto. I need to change. So I ended up working in London for about a year and a half, and I applied to grad schools in England when I was there, just, on the off chance, and I got into one of them. So then I ended up basically going and doing a master's in nutrition science, where I started to I did my first real research projects as part of my master's, and I loved it. I'd never really liked lab work when I was an undergrad, but when it's your own project and you're doing your own statistics, somehow it all becomes a lot more interesting. And so I decided to stay on, do a PhD. Did that at the University of Southampton. I had a fabulous supervisor. His name's Dr. Philip Calder. Highly recommend him for anyone who's thinking about doing a PhD. He's quite elderly now. Well, yeah, he's not elderly. But he's getting up there, like where he's going to retire at some point, probably. So if you want him, grab him now. He's
well, the iron's
fabulous.
Hot. While the iron's hot.
Yeah, no, I honestly, he's wonderful. He's very well known in the nutrition field now. So I was very lucky to have him at sort of, at the not the beginning of his career, but midway through his career, and he was terribly supportive. So once I finished my PhD, which I did in omega-3 fatty acids, I applied to get a job. I ended up getting a job at GlaxoSmithKline, which at that point had a nutrition division. And this is probably where I first started I had to use my creativity, I guess, a little bit, because I was first hired into the innovation team. And this was a kind of a unique little team that was based within the nutritional healthcare division, and its mandate was to look 10 years out. Basically, instead of just looking at the project of the day, you sort of had to go and look, where are things going and what might we want for products, nutritional products 10 years down the line. So it gave you a little bit of a scope to do things a little bit wider. And a lot of what I did when I first came into that group basically was coming up with claims ideas, trying to work with marketing to come up with ideas for products, so product claims, confirming that with some of the marketing folks to say, would this even fit within the brand plans? Most brand plans don't go longer than 3 years, but you have to kind of fit within the nutrition brand sort of, I guess, brand circle, areas where it can go, not go too far, because it's never gonna see the light of day if you're too far away from what the core brand is about. But you want to stretch it a little bit, right, and see where the opportunities are. So I did a lot of setting up some research projects at various universities in the UK with a little bit new and interesting kind of areas of research. So that was really fun. I then, just because of various reorgs and things within the company, as you know, from working at Nestle, companies are constantly reorganizing and pulling teams together and making new teams and everything, which sometimes I think can be a little disruptive to innovation, but, is what companies do. I ended up then doing more market-focused nutrition work on top of the innovation work. And that was a nice opportunity, because then you had to use your creativity in things like advertising, or at least trying to make sure that the big ideas that some of the marketing department had basically could be, sat within a level of evidence that was supportable and within the regulatory framework, and was compelling to make people interested in them, but not a stretch too far so you were going to be in trouble and being deceptive, right?
Which sounds like a really important blend, which we talked about before the interview started, between the art and the science, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about this idea of, people often think creativity is just this artistic, creating some wacky idea, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you integrate this idea of a body of evidence and data with how to create new things and innovate, because I think that's the paradox that people struggle with. It's not one or the other, it's both together.
So how do you do it? I don't know if there's a secret sauce for it, basically. But I think one of the key things is to try and get as many people's opinions as possible, but keeping some of those with a grain of salt. And then you have to basically make sure that, you have a good sponsor for your project, because it's funny. I was talking so now I've got a consultancy contract with UNICEF, and I've just done this big questionnaire out to a number of UNICEF offices asking about a product that they're currently using within a number of their programs. And then we got stuff back, and we're trying to sort through that data right now. And I was talking to my boss yesterday, and he's like, okay, well, we have to kind of sit and have a look at this, because you get a lot of positive feedback on some of the things that, on this product, when that there's issues with it because it's not getting to all the people that it needs to, or potentially this issue that might not be it might not be just product, it could be other reasons. But he goes, sometimes when you ask questions to people, you get questions like, oh, I'm very happy. Then you were happy with your Nokia phone before the iPhone came along, so you don't know what you're missing, right? Yeah. So you have to have a level of, not let things get killed or knocked back too early on in the process. I mean, some things, if they're not fitting within that brand circle that I've said before, that are a bit too off perhaps, yes, some of those can die, but some of the good ideas, you have a good idea and it's not actually landing, try another way to make it land if you really feel passionate about it. Because sometimes these situations come up when you do testing, you know, people don't know what they're missing, so they don't quite visualize what you're doing.
So it
So
sounds
in
like you
terms
take
of
your idea and just reposition it a little bit so that
yeah,
they can see it
reposition it
differently.
or try a different way to sell it, right? Sometimes you need to have visuals, you need to have potential, you know, if you're looking at new product formats, sometimes you need to have sort of packaging or
Yeah.
something
Or like the
tangible for someone to look
prototype.
at,
Yeah.
right? So if
Yeah.
you're looking for a new delivery method, maybe you know, rather than a capsule, you might want a pre-filled syringe, and people may not be able to visualize
Right.
that. But if you bring in another sort of product or something that you can show to people, then sometimes it lands a little bit better. So
Yeah.
with the advertising, a lot of that is visual, right? So it's nice to be able to take things and say, okay, well, I can't support it the way that you want because there's no evidence for that. But if you change this word, or if you or potentially put more of a focus on this part and the actual visual, then it's more justifiable if you get into an area of dispute with a regulator, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's basically just there isn't a secret sauce. You just have to try and spend time in the trenches and do it and see what happens, I guess.
Well, and that's a really good point, because what one of the things that's important to creativity is this ability to step into the uncertainty of what's going to happen and be willing to fail and be willing to be wrong. And
Right.
that sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, try something. If it's not working, try it a different way.
Right.
Readjust and kind of pivot as you go. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And also it's good to have a sponsor. At least if you're working within a company, try and get someone up the food chain to back you a little bit, so you have someone to go to that's going to have an alternative point of view. I think that's important in big companies because, you know, certain divisions can be very powerful and can, you know, kill an idea or pull funding if they don't think things are working.
So that's a bit
And
creative as
sometimes
well.
that's
Like,
justified. Sometimes that's
finding the right
right.
sponsor, right? Yeah.
Right.
So for anybody joining just now, a little bit late, I'm speaking to Dr. Fiona Wallace, who's a fascinating individual. We worked together many years ago, and she is a PhD in nutritional science. She's working on many different projects and has an MBA and also writing a book. So one of the questions I'd love to know, I've got your website up there. This is your consulting company for the NGOs that you work with. Do you consider yourself creative, or when you think back to it, when you were a child, did you think you were a particularly creative child?
Well, I always was quite visual. I always read a lot, and I also used to draw a lot. When I was young, so the first 10 years of my life, we lived in sort of rural Nova Scotia in the Annapolis Valley. And, you know, I was on my parents' well, we were sort of on it wasn't a proper farm, but it was out in farmland, right? So it wasn't like you could just have a lot of kids around all the time. You had kids at school, but you know, it wasn't like there was a long way to walk to get to the neighbors, right? Is what I'm trying to say. So I was kind of on my own a lot. So you kind of had to amuse yourself sometimes. I had younger siblings, but you know, they were younger than me, so you know, it was fine for a while, but really I had to sort of amuse myself quite a bit because I'm the oldest of the lot. And was it so? Yeah, I did used to draw a lot. I did used to paint. I did used to like to make things. I like to cook. Actually, one of the ways that I express my creativity is through cooking, and I think that fits well with nutrition because it also means that if you have to get into the food science area or something, you kind of intuitively know some things that because you've spent time in a kitchen and you understand how things rise and bake and
context, right?
gel,
like,
right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, really, that's kind of important. So, so yeah, so I think I've been fairly creative. I always took out in high school. What I did find though is that once you start deciding that you want to go into the sciences, it starts, you know, you have to drop all those things. I had to drop out. I didn't end up doing a lot of, you know, I was doing track, and then I stopped doing that in my last few years because you had to focus so hard on getting the marks to get into university, and you had all the science prerequisites you had to get done. So it
Just
kind of peeled off
time-wise,
in
your
high
time.
school. Yeah.
So it was your time was limited. So it
time
wasn't
was
like,
time was limited, and I also had a part-time job, so so that's kind of when it started to go away and the whole science logic kind of stream started to happen. The one thing that I have done all through is basically cook, and I think that cooking is sort of one of the main ways that I've kept up a creative element in my life.
Well, tell us more about, so fast forward to recently, you've been writing a novel. So tell us a little bit about like what prompted. So it sounds like you kind of dropped, like me, I was the same way. I love performance, and I kind of did my vet stuff, excuse me, and dropped all of the. I felt like I had to choose art or science, and I guess logistically you kind of do because of the time. But I kind of came back to my performance. So is that what happened to you? Is it something that just naturally came back to you, or what prompted you to start writing the novel? And maybe tell us a little bit more about that. But before you do, I'm gonna pop up your LinkedIn connection here. So if anybody wants to connect with Dr. Wallace, you can find her on LinkedIn, this link, or you can send me a message. But yeah, please tell us about your book and how that kind of came to be.
So one of the things, I guess I had a milestone birthday a few years ago, right? So that's also a key kind of point in your life where you basically say, okay, what's on my bucket list and what do I want to do? So I had prior to setting up my business and starting to move out of CPG into the whole NGO side of nutrition, I sort of had a bit of space and time to, where I was going through my options. I'd gone through a reorg in a business, and I had time for the first time in ages. And around that time, I had the milestone birthday, and I was like, okay, well, one of the things I've always wanted to do is to potentially write a novel, or at least try and write a novel. And I love detective stories, so I have started a book, which is still in draft. It's more than halfway done, but it's still a little bit of a work in progress. And it's a detective story about a dog walker. As you know, and as you've seen, I'm a big dog fan, and I spend a large portion of my day is basically walking my two, well, not a large portion, but my exercise every day is walking my dogs, right? So you meet a whole wild bunch of people basically when you're walking your dogs. They are the best way to make friends in your neighborhood. I think if you don't have a baby, a dog is the next best thing. But you just meet all sorts of different types. So I was thinking, okay, well, actually a dog park is actually a good place to sort of have a nice cast of characters. And actually, I go to a lot of parks, and some of them fairly rural and ravines and things like that, in and around the GTA. And I was like, okay, well, my dog walker is going to find a body on the park and then get sucked into all these stories and all this cast of characters that her buddies in the dog park are going to help her solve this mystery. So it's still a bit of a work in progress, but that's my premise. And so far, the first few chapters really wrote themselves, and now I'm getting into some of the plot twists, and that's what I'm trying to. That's taking the time. You've got to go back and you've got to say, okay, well, this is too obvious now. Do you need to build this into, sort of hide the great reveal at the end? And, so I've plotted things out, and now I'm just kind of looking at the setup to finish off the final bit. So it's in progress. I've enjoyed it. I made great progress when I had a bit of time to work on it. Then I needed to start earning money again, so it's kind of gone a little bit quiet over the last year and a bit, but it's it's there, and I've been trying to work on it as much as I can, and one day it'll get done and it'll get out. And if it gets published nowhere, I'll just publish it on the internet. So
I would love to read it. It sounds fascinating. And
thank you. Right. Actually, there's a lot of people have said that they think it might be interesting. So we'll see. We'll see what it ends up.
I love the idea of a dog park. There are some interesting characters at dog parks. So,
you get a complete slice of society in the dog park. And the cool thing is, everyone loves their dog, right? So you've always got something to talk about. The conversation and the dialogue becomes quite easy. So it's good.
Yes. Yeah. So would you say that time then is the main obstacle to your creative practice outside of your professional creativity as far as writing a book? Would that be?
Yeah, right now it is. So when I came back, so when COVID hit, I was actually volunteering in Malawi. I was doing my shift from industry into NGO developing nutrition, right? I'm doing sort of a sideways move. And I'd been in Malawi working as a nutrition policy advisor for a civil society organization as part of a larger project that was funded by the government of Canada. And March 2020 hit, and we were all just pulled home. So when that happened, I started setting up my own business, and that has taken off, which is great. But it's also meant that my work days no longer got any kind of potential rhythm to it, and there's been some times where I've just been completely overcommitted and I've had no time. And when I have had time, I've needed to sleep, or I've needed to catch up on my personal life and my personal tasks. And it's just meant that some of the book stuff has basically gone to one side. Once my current contract is finished, I'm ring fencing, 6 weeks to finish this off. But yeah, I'm someone who finds it hard to potentially turn things on and off. I kind of have to be in it and focused on it to be able to do a good job on it, I think, or at least what I feel.
As opposed to writing 10 minutes a day, like you need like focus.
Some people can do that. So one of the things that I did when I was starting to write the book was I took a creative writing course at University of Toronto, right? And that, we had a few authors come in and speak to us. And one of the things that they said was, there's no easy way to do it. You just have to be disciplined and do, he says, it took me 5 years to do my first novel, but I did it by doing half an hour in the morning before I got up and ring fencing that time and doing it. Now, I think the author that came said that has a lot more self-discipline than potentially I do, which is it is what it is, but that worked for him. So I think different things work for different people. I'm better if I just have a chunk of time and I'm focusing on one thing, and I know that about all of my work, right? You got to be in the weeds sometimes, and it's hard to pick up and drop things. And at least I find that, especially with very technical roles, right? It's hard.
Yeah, like I have a hard time writing half an hour at a time because I just gotta get into the references or like the thought train. But I guess, like you said, it works for some people. So for people who are watching that may be in a scientific role who think like, okay, well, maybe I can be creative at work. What would you say to them as far as how they could try to be more creative at work, and what benefits do you think most people would see when they use their creativity at work? Like you're talking about being creative, and before we got on here, you're talking about being creative and implementing this delivery of a vitamin A supplement. And like, these are important problems. We're not talking about like painting at work because you're bored. We're talking about like solving important problems in the world.
Yeah.
So how would you tell someone that they can start being more creative like you in incorporating that with their knowledge and their scientific experience, and then what that might benefit them or others?
Right. So one of the things, so this is not about the vitamin A, this is about, which is a current project I'm working on, which is kind of a sticky problem. And, I haven't cracked it yet. Right. And it won't be me who just cracks it. It'll be a team of people, and, I'm coming up with some ideas. But one of the things I did when I was working in Nestle, that was quite useful, and it sounds a bit out the box, but I actually did the improv course at Second City.
That's great.
And what that does is it gets you kind of thinking laterally. And that's like the most fun you're ever going to have. It's just, it also gets rid of the sense of awkwardness of feeling like you're worried too much about what people are going to think if you speak up. Right. So if you do have a good idea, you may not, I think some technical people may not want to voice it because it sounds a little bit out there. Or sometimes it's viewed that those things are not your remit when you're in a technical role. Right. Yes. So what I found I did all the 6 levels at Second City. And what I found was it made you think a bit more laterally. It got rid of any sense of awkwardness for voicing ideas, which was which was good. And it also changes your way of thinking, I think, to sort of, instead of, because I think sometimes, you know, at one point I was working in regulatory affairs, and it's, you know, you're often the bearer of bad news in regulatory affairs, just, you know, and you can kill some marketer's great idea, and, you know,
because that's illegal.
yeah, well, you know, let's say that, I'm sorry, right? And that's not me, that's what the government says, but you're just kind of the messenger. So you can get you know, it can be difficult, it can be draining, quite frankly. To be in that position. So it also potentially helps you to think a little sideways, to say again about the advertising. Well, this is what you could do. This is what you could say, because it kind of pulls those lateral muscles, I guess.
Is it because of the yes and experience?
I think it's the yes anding. It's a yes. Okay, I'm not going to say no this. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to add to it. I'm going to add to this idea. That's the whole improv philosophy, right?
Yes.
So I found that helped quite a bit. And if nothing else, like when I did those classes, I just had such a laugh that, you know, you have a great weekend, you know, do it on a Saturday, you laugh all afternoon, and you go off. Yeah. Right. So, and it's a safe place, so you can act stupid and no one's going to judge you, right? It's a judgment-free zone.
Well, I was going to say, like, I think I agree. I talk a lot about the two kind of levels of obstacles for expressing creativity. One is the inner critic of, like, that's a stupid idea, but also the fear of judgment. And I totally, I believe this as well. So I love that you're validating my point of view, that it sounds like what you're saying is that by doing the improv classes and expressing yourself where it doesn't really matter in a safe place, it gives you that muscle memory to be more confident to do it in your professional life. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it does. It gave me more confidence. You know, so I that was, I took it right at when I'd had a big job change, and actually I think it helped. I think it helped quite a lot. It allowed me to speak up. I stopped caring so much about what other people think, because I mean, there was a lot. I had some knowledge gaps. I know I had knowledge gaps when I went into that job, but you still have to speak up. And you still have to trust your own judgment. And, you know, that those two things, the inner critic and the fear of judgment, can get in the way. And so it maybe just makes you a little bit less worried about your perceived thinking of what other people think of you and your idea, right? Like, so I found that helped. Now, on some of my current contracts, I'm not sure if it's helping or not, but what it's kind of given me in some ways is a bit of courage to apply for them in the first place, because you think, okay, right, like, I'm going to try for that one because you know, okay, I only tick maybe 80% of what they're looking for, and I don't have this 20%, but let's give it a go, right? Like, let's
kind of courage to do something a little bit, courage to do something that you might not otherwise do. And I think I've heard with women, it's particularly hard because we feel like have to check every box and then some. So that's interesting that improv gave you the confidence.
It did at that point. So I mean, I'm, you know, and I just think generally as well, when you start to do a move, if you've made a big move and you're trying to set up your own, you've just got to be brave about certain things and slightly creative about where you can, you know, get your clients from, right? So so
do you believe that doing that, the more you do that, the more resilience you get for doing it more and more? Like, it's like,
I think so.
It's kind of a snowball effect.
Yeah, I think so. I think you, I think it does. It builds up, you know. So, you know, you've just got to be brave sometimes and just try things. And if you fall, well, you fall. I think it also helps with your fear of failure, because I think a lot of women, or maybe a lot of people who are quite highly educated, are very grades and results driven, right? And then you have this worry about failure sometimes, and you know, you got to kind of get over that when you're running your own business. Like, you don't want to fail, but you don't want to have your fear of failure stopping you from trying things, or stopping you from creatively looking at things, or maybe thinking a bit wider about where your client base might come from, right? So you have to sometimes be brave and knock on doors and try.
Yeah, the whole idea of failing forward. And that's what I love about a creative practice, is that, you know, when you're writing your book, or when I'm doing my improv, or my stand-up, you know, you realize that the more you fail, the faster you get to where you want to go. And I feel like you said, I agree with the science training. We're often type A, you know, we're assessed by our knowledge and our ability to move things forward and be right. And especially once you get mid-career or later, you just get used to knowing it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's putting yourself in that discomfort of creativity that can help solve problems in your life or your organization. So this was fantastic, Fiona. I really loved chatting with you and learning more about the amazing work you're doing and how you're blending your scientific knowledge with your creative side to like push the needle on really important problems in the world, but also personally using your creativity to write the dog walking detective book, which I can't, do you have a title for it? I can't wait to read it.
It's called The Off Leash right now, but I think that might change. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. Yeah, it sounds great. Well, I can't wait to read it. So let me know when you have a draft or you
pre-read. I will.
I would love it. So thank you so much. Again, you can connect with Dr. Fiona Wallace, nutritionist, MBA, author to be on LinkedIn. You can also check out the work she does through her company with NGOs and all nutrition consulting at her website here. And thank you so much, Fiona. And I look forward to reading your book.
Thanks so much. All right. Bye. Nice to see you.